go again?
Oh, no, not again.
You've seen it before, haven't you?
Dom, how long have we been doing?
Once more unto the bridge, dear friends.
Again and again and again until we're both dead.
Hello, welcome to You've Seen It Before, Movie Reviews, Connections of Mine. Oppenheimer, the latest film from Christopher Nolan, and the first film with his collaboration with Universal as compared to Warner Brothers, has finally hit theaters, kicking off the Barbenheimer weekend. This movie stars Cillian Murphy as J. Robert Oppenheimer, the physicist who was the head of the Manhattan Project, the U.S.'s effort during World War II to develop the atomic bomb, and it also deals with his life and the fallout, both figuratively and literally, from his discoveries. Now, this video review will contain certain spoilers of Oppenheimer. I'll save those till the end, but this one I'll be doing my as much spoiler-free-ness as I can. However, because it's a historical biopic as it is, even with Hollywood, granted, I mean, it's history. I feel like there's not really much you can do to not spoil history, except tell people to not read a book or something. But I'm going to say read a book and then come back and see Oppenheimer, because really, if this is where you're going to, be getting your first information about J. Robert Oppenheimer and these events, then what are you doing? So, that being said, let's get into some spoiler-free as I can make up thoughts on Oppenheimer. Is it a good movie? Is it a good Christopher Nolan movie? Is it worth seeing in the theaters? And is it a good half of the Barbenheimer weekend? While I can't speak to Barbie because, I didn't see Barbie, as far as Oppenheimer goes, this is definitely a masterpiece as far as practical cinema making is. It is definitely worth seeing on a big screen. It's definitely worth seeing with an audience. I knew about the whole Barbenheimer, meme phenomenon before going to the theater, but even on a Thursday, preview screening, my theater was packed. And, that's a good thing, I think, because this movie deserves to be seen on a big screen with a crowd because, my gosh, I believe Christopher Nolan has been quoted as saying, he's been quoted as saying there are no CG shots in Oppenheimer, while I'm sure CG was used in a lot of these shots, as far as the digitally erasing, crew equipment or whatever, digitally altering, weather or something like that, or superimposing images over one each other. There are a couple shots in particular that were obviously superimposed over one another, but I think what he's trying to get at here is, there's several cutaway shots, and we've seen a couple of these in the trailers, cool fire effects and waveform effects and all that. And if those were all done practically, then this is gorgeous. And while, again, this might, call it a spoiler if you want, but yes, this is all about J. Oppenheimer's life leading up to and beyond the Trinity test, the first detonation of an atomic bomb. While obviously they didn't detonate an actual atomic bomb for this, once they get to that, the actual explosion of it looks fantastic, phenomenal, and all the visuals in here are stunning. What more can you say from a Christopher Nolan project? Because, this is what you come to expect from his movies, and I gotta say, you have to really not know anything about cinema to not say that these are beautiful, beautiful shots in this movie, and, great job on that. But that's only half the story, I think. And what about the characters and how this movie handles the story, the handling of J. Robert Oppenheimer's life, because there's as we all know, or at least many of us know, Christopher Nolan has a habit of using non-linear storytelling to tell a lot of these stories. He's been getting more and more yeah, bold in his non-linear storytelling ever since, Memento is obviously the first one that really did this, but he's been playing around with time a lot, especially his more recent films. You can go back to 2017's Dunkirk, where you had, three separate time periods and three separate times throughout, the timeline, and keep cutting back and forth between them. Tenet, obviously. I just rewatched Tenet before seeing Oppenheimer just to get in the mood of Christopher Nolan, and that was another one that definitely dealt with, non-linear storytelling and time, playing around with time and how you play and do that. Oppenheimer, yeah, it still does that. However, I feel like it's a little more restrained than previous films, mainly because, I feel like Christopher Nolan, he wants to tell a more coherent story and get his point across without too much confusion as to what's going on, because there's about two separate time periods here. The main, I guess, time period is Oppenheimer's early life in his college days, so probably about the 20s or so, up through 1945, where we get to the first test of the atomic bomb, and then where the second time period is portrayed more in flashbacks in the 1950s, when Oppenheimer's legacy is coming under greater scrutiny, and in these flashbacks, there are two main performances that should be singled out for great praise in this one. One, obviously, Cillian Murphy as J. Robert Oppenheimer. He is he brings his A game to this, just as he does with all these ones. But I really appreciate the fact that he's he's bold. He's arrogant to a degree. And he's a womanizer as well. And Murphy's able to bring all of these character traits into his performance throughout all of this, and you can tell this is one where it's got to be extra hard for him, because he has to play a man in two separate stages of life. One where he's brimming with confidence and self-assuredness, and then after that when he's being weighed down by the legacy and the consequences of what he has wrought and brought into the world with the nuclear weapons, and that duality is definitely on point here. The other performance that I want to single out is Robert Downey Jr. as Admiral Lewis Strauss, who, if you don't know history, he was a senator. He was he served as an admiral during the wars, and he served on the Atomic Energy Commission, and he was in direct competition with J. Robert Oppenheimer. And so we're playing back and forth, using him as a plot device or a narrator of sorts into Oppenheimer's life, because the framing device is Strauss's confirmation hearing to a cabinet position, and they're dredging up all of his history with Oppenheimer, and then we get the flashbacks, which is a fun way to do it. However, I feel like at certain times, especially near the end, it feels like it becomes more about Strauss rather than Oppenheimer, and I feel like that kind of gets lost. Robert Downey Jr. does a amazing performance in this. It just goes to show that he's capable of amazing performances outside of playing Tony Stark. But I do think that structure does get in the way a little bit, especially towards the end. And there's one, the big whammy moment at the very end is framed in this way, and I'm not sure that was particularly necessary in the grand scheme of things, because to a certain extent, you have a flashback or one little moment, and then they'll be referenced into one time near the middle and then one time at the very end, and then you just kind of this movie is close to 3 hours long. I believe it is 3 hours long, and with that length of time, it's easy to forget, oh yeah, that moment was in this movie, wasn't it? So that's why I say that this framing device, this nonlinear storytelling, does get in the way a little bit with the movie. But that being said, not enough, in my opinion, to to knock it entirely. And also, props to other a couple of performances. You get some great, Christopher Nolan standby actors. Kenneth Branagh makes an appearance a couple times as Niels Bohr, and if I hadn't checked the IMDb, I would not have believed it. But Gary Oldman once again proves he's a chameleon. He plays President Truman near the end of the movie, and I had no idea that was Gary Oldman. So the man, he just disappears into the world. Maybe because he wasn't on screen for too terribly long, but man, that was a bit of a surprise to me. So there's that for you. Overall, I would say, as a biopic goes, obviously with any kind of Hollywood historical biopic, there's going to be some creative liberties that they take with it. Timeline shrinkage and compression on that, and some people maybe composites of other people. So I don't know the history of Oppenheimer and the Manhattan Project well enough to distinguish where exactly those compressions and composites are. However, I do feel like this is a very good telling of these events. As far as the Oppenheimer's life up to through the Manhattan Project, the flashbacks to his life after that, because I feel like that's kind of the more interesting thing. And I get what Christopher Nolan was going for. I feel like the way he uses Admiral Strauss's testimony and focusing on him in the flashback sequences, and then in the Manhattan Project sequences, they're focusing more on Matt Damon and Cillian Murphy's Oppenheimer and Matt Damon's General Leslie Groves dynamic, as they're both showing how this brilliant and tortured and flawed man was both used for his government, both as an institution during the Manhattan Project, and then being used by his government as in the terms of an individual person, namely Strauss, for his own benefits, and irregardless of the well-being of Oppenheimer himself. So there's that to be said. However, I feel like the telling of the Manhattan Project segments work better than the flashback segments featuring RDJ as far as the storyline goes. Also, I feel like Nolan also plays around with the color grading in this, because the flashback sequences, you think that it's going to stay with the color grading sequence is going to be all right. The flashback sequences are going to be black and white, whereas because the flashback sequences in the 50s are going to be in black and white, whereas the present past sequences dealing with the Manhattan Project and stuff is going to be in color. But then they start switching that around in near the end, and then that just got kind of confusing as far as why he decided to change things up near the very end. But that was definitely an interesting choice. Some people might get turned off by that, but I thought that was a very effective way of showing these things. So, like I said, those are my main thoughts. This is maybe not my favorite Christopher Nolan movie, but definitely a masterpiece in filmmaking in particular. So if I was going to give Oppenheimer a letter grade, I would say this is an A. Again, there are things that I can definitely nitpick that's knock it down from A+, but definitely solid A effort here. So those are my main spoiler-free thoughts on Oppenheimer. Like I said, there's only so much I can do as far as spoiler-filled comparisons here, just because again, it's history. You go read a history book, but some spoiler things as far as plot developments and character points that seem familiar. One thing that when I talk about the whammy moment at the very end is, I think I want to say it's like 1947. I forget what year they say that the exchange takes place, but it's when Strauss is taking Oppenheimer on a tour through this institute or whatever that he wants him to be the president of or whatever, and we see Albert Einstein, feeding the ducks or whatever at the pool down at the pond down by down that way, and so Oppenheimer goes over to talk to him, and then a lot of it is focusing on Strauss, like, oh, what did Oppenheimer say to Einstein that made him turn him against me and all that. But then the whammy, we finally get to reveal what he said to him, and it's basically that basically the gist of it is like, oh, you guys you threw that nice dinner for me because after you just used my work, destroyed my work, and you were meant to honor me, but it was mainly for your benefit, anything or whatever, because you basically cast me aside, and they're going to do the same to you when it comes time. People will shake your hand and smile at you and hope and say that they forgive you for anything, but it's really for their benefit, not for your benefit. Essentially, I got kind of vibes of the Dark Knight from that, where it's like where Gary Oldman's Christopher Gordon, I forget who exactly said, but it's like, he basically like, no, they will turn on you, Batman. It's like, you might be the hero now, but the people of Gotham, they will turn on you, and all of it will be for nothing theoretically. And it's like, yeah, that was kind of the vibe that I was getting on that. But overall, I didn't have many comparisons to be made out here. One that, it might be a coincidence, but it was a fun little thing that I noticed in here when like I said, I rewatched Tenet right before I saw Oppenheimer, just to get in the Nolan mood of it all. And I'd forgotten this part, but there's a long exchange between, John David Washington's protagonist and I guess his contact on the Time War or whatever. And she's telling him all about, it's like, oh, when Oppenheimer developed the atomic bomb, it was all these things. And it's like, is this kind of like a Pixar thing where, they slip in references to future projects and their current projects? Do I need to go back and rewatch like Dunkirk or whatever and see if there's like a weird backwards reference to Tenet in that? So again, that could just be a coincidence. I mean, we're talking about weapons of mass destruction in that scene, but I don't know. I thought that was a cute little coincidence. So those are my main thoughts on Oppenheimer. What did you think of the movie? Did you like it? Did you not like it? What about my analysis? Do you agree, disagree? Did I miss anything? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate whatever audience I can get. Be sure to look for my next movie review, which will be for, I believe, Meg 2: The Trench, which comes out August 4th. As well as we should be getting close to the end of Season 2 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and as well as the run of Marvel's Secret Invasion, which I'll be doing overall reviews for those coming out soon here as well. And if you like this video or any other video on my channel, please give me a like, share, and especially subscribe. I would very much appreciate it. Again, thank you so much for watching, but just remember, there is nothing new under the sun. And yes, I've seen it before.